So anyway, so Nietzsche's prediction was that once you pull the rug out from underneath the system, it might take a long time to fall, but it's going to fall because there's no foundation left. And the system was actually logically coherent once you accepted the assumptions. And the assumptions were, well, they were basically Christian assumptions or Judeo-Christian assumptions in Europe, you know, and they were predicated on a religious substructure. And those religious ideas, although it wasn't as obvious in the late 1900s as it is now, had an unbelievably ancient history. So, you know, Christian ideas are derived from Jewish ideas, and Jewish ideas are predicated on Egyptian ideas, and Egyptian ideas are based in Mesopotamian ideas, and that's about as far as back as we can go. But then we know that there are shamanistic traditions that are basically religious in structure that go back maybe 25,000 years, and then, you know, before that we don't know. We don't know. But there wasn't nothing before that, because there were people like us, fundamentally, for at least 150,000 years. And then there were people who were more or less like us for, depends on how you count, we diverged from our chimp human ancestor about 7 million years ago. So God only knows how deeply rooted those ideas are. Now, you know, the rationalist critics, like, and we still have them, like Dawkins, for example, you know, they kind of think of a religious system as a superstitious scientific theory, you know, and it's exactly what people like Voltaire thought 300 years ago, you know, and it's, you know, I get their point, but it's stupid. No, I'm telling you, like, it's like, forget about that. That's like 1750, you know, it's not 1750 anymore, and we've got different problems. And the idea that religion is a superstitious scientific theory, it's like, that's a really stupid idea. All that means is that you haven't read anything about the psychology of religion or about religious phenomenology in general. I mean, anybody who has any grounding in neuroscience and who actually reads knows, for example, that there are all sorts of neural phenomena that result in religious experience. You know, so for example, if you get epilepsy, there's a high probability that your aura, which is the sense you have before the epilepsy hits, there's a high probability that that's going to be associated with religious experience. And it was for Dostoevsky, for example. So what happened to Dostoevsky was that he was kind of a student radical, you know, under the czars, and they arrested him along with the other student radicals and threw him in the prison in Moscow. I think it was in Lubyanka, and they kept him there for a while. He's kind of an aristocratic guy, so he wasn't used to hard living. And then before they let him go, they woke him up at 6 in the morning and took him out in the firing squad yard, and then they lined up all the people who would do the shooting with a firing squad, and they shot him with blanks. But he didn't know they were blanks, and so that was a little hard on his nervous system, and so he developed epilepsy as a consequence of that. And one of the consequences of his epilepsy was that just before he had the actual seizure, he said that it appeared to him that his knowledge of the structure of reality was deepening and deepening and deepening and deepening until it was absolutely overwhelming. He felt like he was on the verge of discovering the secret of the universe, and then apparently the secret of the universe was a little too big to fit inside his head, and he'd have an epileptic seizure. But it's very interesting because Dostoevsky was kind of a hack novelist before he underwent prison, and then he had the firing squad thing happen, and then he was sent to this like horrible prison full of murderers and rapists for a long time. And so when he came out, he wasn't the same guy. It's hard to say exactly how much the experiences changed him and how much the epilepsy changed him, but certainly there are depths of representation in his writing that I don't think he could have reached without the epilepsy. And so religious experiences, man, they're hardwired into your brain, and we can elicit them with some regularity. Now you might think, well, that means they're a biological side effect. It's like, yeah, maybe, and maybe not too, you know. So, you know, I don't know what the rationalists do with that sort of thing. You know, maybe they say, well, that's an evolutionary spandrel. It doesn't really mean anything of any importance. It's like the whole you know what a spandrel is? A spandrel is something that characterizes an organism, but that hadn't really evolved. It just more or less happened. So you can't say that it has a function. It's like a side effect of something else. And one of the great tricks of rationalist evolutionary thinkers is that they call anything that a biological organism manifests that they can't account for rationally a spandrel. And it's a pathological trick. And you certainly can't do that with something like religious experience. I mean, you just have to be a dolt to think that.